Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles people who are passionate about what they do for a living, what organization they belong to, or the community they are a part of. Here is your host, Dave Cunningham.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Professional radio broadcasters, those voices coming out of your speakers, some we listen to every day. But how much do we know about them? How do they come to be at the station you're listening to? What do they do when they're not playing the music and keeping you in touch with your community? What about family? In the past, I've had the pleasure of speaking with a couple of them, gentlemen I used to work with, both retired. In this episode, a broadcaster, someone I had not met until we recorded this conversation, who is still getting up crazy early after 33 years. Here is the morning man from Rock107 in Belleville, Ontario. His name is Buzz Collins. Buzz, welcome to the program.
Good to be here.
We are going to talk about several different things, and to me there is so much more to you than being just a broadcaster, but that's where we're going to start, and I'd like to know where you got the bug for radio.
I got the radio bug at a really early age. I remember when I was allowed to first have a radio in my bedroom, and I just kind of romanticized the whole realm of radio. I was a huge music fan, still am, and I don't know. I just kind of got sucked into this world of everything that was radio. And I remember when I was like 11 years old, bugging my mom, she would drive me downtown so I could meet, the radio DJ who was on location at the Bay. I religiously walked through rain, sleet, snowstorm every Wednesday to the local radio station to get the weekly top 40. It was just this bug that I got at a really early age. And I remember as young as around 11 wanting to be a radio DJ, and lo and behold, here I am.
Now, I've mentioned on the program before that I was involved in radio here in Kingston, spent about 20 years working for a particular station here in town, spent my whole radio career in the one place. Unlike you and like a lot of other broadcasters, to move up, if you will, in terms of money and prestige and all that sort of thing, you tend to move around.
Yep.
So from what I have read, you started in Saskatchewan and went to Alberta and Manitoba and Ontario. I'd like to know what kind of impact that has on you with all that moving around, as well as your family.
That's a great question. Because now I look back and I kind of give my head a shake and I wonder, what was I thinking? Because as you know, every single move, every moving is it's got to be one of the most stressful things anybody can do. And we did it a lot. But as you alluded to, I mean, in this business, if you want to take advantage of those opportunities that might afford a better paycheck, a little more notoriety, maybe a larger market, then you have to be willing to kind of pack up every now and move. So we did. And I am so fortunate that I had a very resilient wife. I still have a very resilient wife and my kids. I've actually quite recently, my kids are all grown up, but I apologize to them. They actually say, you know what? We like having that part of our history growing up. They said it formed who we are, and so that they have no resentment about it, thank God. But I think at the time it certainly created some pressures for them. Going to one new school after another.
I know when I was growing up as a kid, my father moved around quite a bit, so that when I grew up and started working, it was something I wasn't interested in doing a lot of, which was moving around. So that may have influenced my decision to do something else after I decided I need to make a little more money than radio would allow. 33 years later in the broadcast business, let's talk about how different radio is today versus what it was when you first started.
Oh, wow. Well, when and I'm sure there's some vets that could tell me how it used to be for them. But I remember when I started, we were still using reel-to-reels for editing phone calls, and at some stations, even some of the music was on reel-to-reel records and carts and CDs. CDs were like the new thing.
Yeah.
And now, of course, it's all automated, and with automation comes the ability for companies to streamline their operations, which means fewer personnel. So yeah, it's changed greatly, both in the means and mechanisms, but the fact that there's much less bodies in the building than there used to be.
Do you pick your own music, or is that chosen for you?
That is from day one. That's always been chosen by the music director / program director. But I must say that at my current position at Quinte Broadcasting, they're very flexible. So I often will go in throughout the morning and swap out certain songs for whatever reasons, whether for thematic reasons or I just think something needs a rest and something hasn't been heard in a while. So I don't mess with it too much, but I do, each morning throw in a handful of my own picks, but for the most part, it's picked by the music department.
No, I would guess these days that as it relates to the music component, that people can get their music in a whole pile of different places, different from when I was in broadcasting or even when you first started. How does one in your position set yourself apart so that people will tune into you and not pick up their that's streaming service or whatever?
That's another really good question. And going back to when you asked me about the differences between radio when I started and radio now, I mean, one thing I neglected to mention was just relevance. One of the reasons I fell in love with radio as a kid was because radio was the go-to. It was the end all be all for, basically finding out what was the new music out there. There was no, video services, no streaming services or anything. Radio was where you discovered new music, which is what made it so exciting and so much more relevant back then. So it's something I do think about. I listen to streaming services as well in my free time. I like to try and dig for new stuff that hasn't been heard in the mainstream, and you're these days not really going to find that on radio anymore. But as far as being the guy on the radio, I try my best to provide a show that's entertaining. I specifically in this day and age of everything that we're dealing with, it is a very strategic decision or strategy on my part to keep it very comedy oriented. I want my show to be a place where you can just forget about, everything else that we're dealing with and maybe have a laugh and a chuckle. That, and obviously the biggest thing that sets us apart from, say, streaming services or even satellite radio and whatnot is that ability to be immediate and to be local. So, those are probably our key aces when considering what we're up against these days.
When I was in radio, which was a long time ago, I can remember trends that seemed to come and go. In one particular stream, you'd have people telling you to minimize the personality, just play the music. And then there would be times when they would be looking for people who would have a personality, who would come on and entertain. One of the things that seems to continue to be something that started happening after I had left radio was the business of working in teams. So you have a fellow that you work with in the mornings, Tim Durkin is his name?
Yep.
I know it's him because I see these Facebook posts where you show pictures of him eating wild and wonderful food. I don't know what time in the morning he's eating it, but sometimes. Anyway, the business of being a team, how does that work for you? Does it work, or is it something you're forced to do, or how?
It works. It works if you have the right team. I've had several co-hosts over the years, and of course, for the first better half of my career, it was, I was solo. I thoroughly enjoyed having a team aspect, having a co-host, if, like I said, if that co-host and you click, because I have worked with some people who are great people and you get along with off air, but you just don't have that chemistry or that ability to connect on air, and it's no fun. It's absolutely no fun when it's a situation like that. But fortunately, Tim and I do click. We can talk to each other about anything, and I don't mean just on air. I mean, we can, if I sense that there's something that's bothering him, I can address it. And we've known each other for a while, because we worked together, not in an on air capacity at Chorus Entertainment, but both of us worked in the same building at Chorus Entertainment for a little bit. So I've known him for some time. He's been a family friend for a while as well. So it was just it was a lucky blessing, to be honest, when they hired me and they told me that Tim was going to be my co-host, because I thought, well, how awesome is that? But yeah, no, I do prefer, if you have the right person, I definitely prefer working, in a team environment. Absolutely.
When it comes to looking forward, you've been in the business 33 years, and there seems to be a lot of turnover in radio. Do you still have the fire to get up every morning and do what you do?
You know what?
What time do you get up? Let's start with that.
I get up.
What time?
3:25.
3:25.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know. I'm nuts. You know what? I whine and moan about it once in a while to my wife, and that's about it. It's something that it's the toughest part of my job. I was just saying to her the other day, I said, the job I love, but this schedule just feels like the older I get, the tougher it gets. I don't get used to it. It feels like it gets tougher and tougher. But I once had a general manager tell me, why you make the big money. And I was like, really? He says, I tell every morning announcer, the only time you're really earning your paycheck are those steps from the side of your bed to the shower. And to be honest, that's the toughest part of my gig, is that trying to wake up in the morning before getting out of the house. But
somewhere around 2008, according to something I read online from you, you started to get into hypnotism, and I don't know what the proper noun would be. Is it mentalism or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mentalism.
Okay. Yeah. Why get into that field? How did that all come about?
All right. I'm going to try and give you the Coles Notes answer to this story. So I got into magic first around 1993 as a hobby. I was a late bloomer. I was around 27 when I got into magic. And the way I got into that was really kind of happenstance. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the hair band from the 80s and 90s called Great White. I think they had a hit called Once Bitten, Twice Shy. Anyway,
my son has made me familiar with the band.
Oh, okay. One day I get a call at the station, and it's one of the members of the band, Mike Lairdy, who plays keyboards for Great White, and he's in it. I was in Edmonton on the air at the time, and he called and said, "Listen, I'm in town for a non-official business. I was wondering if you wanted me to come by and do some interview, blah blah blah." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "I'm doing a remote broadcast at a rock bar tonight. It'd be really cool if you could swing by there, sit down, and we could do a little on-air banter, and maybe you could sign a few, autographs for fans." And he was totally fine with that. So longer story shortened, he hung out with me at that bar that evening, and out of the blue, he performs this little magic trick. And he made a dollar disappear in his hand, like just right in front of my eyes. And it made such a huge impression on me. And he wasn't going to tell me how he did it. So a couple of weeks later, when I came across a magic shop at West Edmonton Mall, I relayed that story to the proprietor of the magic shop. And he said, "Well, for $15, you can learn to do the same thing." So I said, "Here's my money." And the rest, they say, is history. I was hooked. I literally got hooked on just doing, I only got into magic just for pure fun, and not for any kind of professional aspect. And keep in mind, this is before there was email and a viable internet that everybody used. So I would just do magic tricks at work for my colleagues, and they'd be bantering about it on air on their own shows. And all of a sudden, I'm getting memos, literal memos, not an email, because we didn't have emails, memos in my inbox at reception asking me if I'm available to perform at this party and that party and this function. And so I fell backwards into making money doing these live magic shows. And that was kind of my first foray into that realm. But one of the guys I met at that magic shop asked me at the time if I wanted to learn hypnosis along with him and another guy. And I just laughed it off. I said, thanks, but no thanks. And these two guys went on to do so well. They eventually got clinically trained, but even before then, they started doing local shows and hitting the road around Alberta. And it turned out so well for them that my one buddy dropped out of pre-med, and the other one quit his high school teaching job. And to this day, they are still professional stage hypnotists. One of them, the one that initially asked me to learn with him, has been performing 6 nights a week at Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas now for, since about 2007, I think it is. And he started an accredited hypnosis course in Las Vegas. And that was where I ended up taking training later on, because again, I'm giving you the very abbreviated version of this story, but by the time I got to Kingston, a few months into working in Kingston, I kind of felt I made the wrong decision by moving here. And I was wondering if I had kind of deep sixed my broadcasting career. I wasn't very happy. So I got on the phone to my buddy who was now performing in Vegas. And I said, listen, Mark, you have to teach me hypnosis. I'm going to be a hypnotist and I'm going to be done with radio. So he did. He taught. I ended up taking clinical training in hypnotherapy and clinical training in stage hypnosis. And again, longer story shortened, I decided to bring the mentalism into the business because I found with the smaller shows that there was more challenges. I don't want to bore you with all the details, but hypnosis is best performed for a larger audience, just because you can only get a small fraction of the audience willing to volunteer in the first place. And from those that volunteer, it's an even smaller fraction of those that will respond well enough to the hypnosis to keep in the show. So I asked my friend / mentor, Mark, I said, what do you do about those invitations for smaller clients? And he says, easy, I don't take them. He said, don't take anything unless they're, pretty sure of an audience of over 100. So that's what I started doing, but I hated turning away the potential business from these smaller clients. So I had this, warehouse still of magic. And I thought, well, why don't I create this mentalism show? Even though in reality, one has nothing to do with the other. To the layperson, it fits kind of in the same niche of the power of suggestion, and it can work for the marketing, and it does, and it has really, really well. So I gave you a very abbreviated answer. I know it doesn't seem like it, but that is a very abbreviated answer as to why the hypnosis and the mentalism.
I've run out of tape on the reel-to-reel tape machine. One thing I wanted to mention when I was thinking about this is that my wife and I went down to Vegas a couple of times. And on one particular trip, we went to see Siegfried and Roy, which is was a big, grandiose production. And on the same trip, we went to a smaller room where there was a fella just doing stuff really close up, really quietly, but impressing the heck out of the audience. And in some respects, I enjoyed that show better than Siegfried and Roy. It's just because of the detail there.
I think that's also probably, you'd be hard pressed to find a magician who won't say, hey, I'd love to go see David Copperfield again and whatnot. But I think most of us in the magic biz probably get a kick more out of those the up close and personal and the intimate performances in magic, rather than, as you put it, the grandiose stage shows and whatnot.
A couple of experiences that you can recall in your career on stage that stand out.
Well, certainly. I mean, this was the crazy part of my beginning in hypnosis. After I had completed my training, I got back to Napanee, where I live here, and it wasn't even a month later. My buddy calls me up, the one who taught me hypnosis, and he says, "Hey, how would you like to fill in for a week?" And I said, in Las Vegas? He says, well, yes, where else would it be? And so I thought, well, I said, are you sure? Like I said, I've only, it was only a month ago that I finished my training. I haven't done a show yet. And he said, the thing is he says, and he's right, anybody can learn hypnosis. But he says, I need somebody who can perform and who can think on their toes and who can ad lib for 75 minutes where needed, because that's a lot of what goes on in a hypnosis show. It's very obviously, it's you plan it out, your routines and whatnot, but it's not scripted. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, I certainly didn't think I was ready, but I also thought I would be nuts to pass up an offer like that, because honestly, he could get anybody on the planet to jump at that opportunity. And so my first run of shows ever was at Planet Hollywood in a smaller room of about 100, 110 people for a week long run. And one of my favorite memories, I've got two favorite memories in hypnosis and mentalism. The first one was after my final show of that run. I had just done 5 shows that first week. And after the show, you shake hands and kiss babies and whatnot and pose for pictures. And this guy comes up to me and he says, he's the stage tech. He introduces himself as the stage tech for the V Theater, which is a larger room in the same venue in Planet Hollywood that I eventually did perform in down the road. But he says to me, I've seen hundreds of hypnosis shows. And I thought his next line was going to be something like, you are absolutely the worst. but much to my surprise he said, I've seen hundreds of hypnosis shows. You are easily one of the best. And I thought, wow, if you only knew that was my 5th show ever. So I'll never forget that. And I use that as a testimonial to this day on my homepage on my website. My other favorite memory that I often tell people, and it sounds like I'm making this up, but I'm not. I was doing a corporate Christmas show in Kingston and it was my mentalism show. And at one time I used to perform my mentalism show as a different character. I won't again bore you with the detail as to my thinking as to why I thought I needed to have some sort of alter ego for the different shows. But I performed my mentalism show as this sort of Eastern European character named Bazeric, who was, a cousin to Buzz Collins, Bazeric from the motherland. And I would show up at these venues at clients in character, stay in character the whole way through the show. Anyway, this one show was at the room at the top of the 4 Points. I think it was the 4 Points. And anyway, halfway through the show, something goes wrong. And I have a lady up front as a volunteer, and I've asked her I've given her a choice of books to choose from and to grab any book, and then to go through that book and find any word you like. It doesn't matter what word it is, whether it's a chapter title or a photo description, whatever. Find whatever word you like, jot it down on a little sticky note and keep it in your pocket just to keep you honest, so you're not changing your mind, halfway through. So she does that. And then I, like I said, realize something has not gone right. And my brain is scrambling. I don't know where to go with this. Sometimes when things go wrong, you find ways to kind of ad lib your way or adjust something, and you find kind of your way through it still. But this was like, I'm I don't know what I'm going to do here. So all I kept saying was very confused, very confusing. And this went on for maybe, I don't know, it felt like a lifetime, but it was probably half a minute. And I finally turned to the lady and I said, Janine, please, very confused. What is your word you choose? And I kid you not, the word she said she chose was confused. And the place erupts in applause. But I swear to you, David, nobody was more impressed in that room at that moment than me.
Compare for me Buzz the broadcaster versus Buzz the onstage performer.
Excuse me. As far as persona, I think it's pretty similar. let's say this. I love the stage shows for the instant, being able to see the instant reaction. I don't, everybody loves an applause and everybody loves affirmation. I'm not, I'd like to think that I'm pretty secure in my own self, that that's not why I'm doing what I'm doing. I love to see people laugh, and I love to see people smile, and that is probably the best quality of a live stage performance. I don't get that in the studio. Mm-hmm. I can work really hard on a bit or a produced piece that's, intentionally, hopefully going to, evoke at least a smile, if not a chuckle for my listeners, but you don't know. Yeah. you never know. Sometimes I do get emails, or I'll get a phone call, somebody saying how much they, love that. I've had people tell me they had to pull over onto the side of the road, and they were laughing so hard, which, I mean, that's better than making a paycheck, to be honest, is knowing that you actually had that reaction. But, as far as the persona, it's, very, very similar. It's the same guy. I don't know. I don't think unless it was a scripted situation, I don't think I could be anybody than who I am. I think who you hear on the air and who you see on stage is really just who you get in person, except just a much more amplified version, maybe maybe a little larger than life version of me. But I'm not talented enough to kind of create, other than when I did my Bazaric character. Mm-hmm. I can't kind of turn on somebody, or at least let's just say I've never tried, other than through that Bazaric character. I've never really tried to be anybody than who I am.
I want to go to Facebook before we run out of time on the show, because I've read several of the things that you've put up on Facebook, and you talk about a lot of your life on Facebook. And in particular, something I don't know that it's been around a long time, but I've noticed it recently, and that's the good guy alert. And this is you picking somebody that's had an impact on your life in one way, shape, or form, and you talk about it, and you write very well. And I'm curious to know how this all came about and why you chose Facebook to deal with it.
So little over 4 years ago, we lost our teenage son, Garrett, to a freak accident. He was doing a chin-up on a soccer net that wasn't anchored, and it fell over and killed him instantly. And it really it did a number on me, as one can expect, in a big way. And I was messed up for quite some time, and I lost all motivation. I had no desire to do anything, to go back on the air, to go back on a stage. I really had lost all motivation for some time, and I struggled with this. And one thing that really weighed on me was something that Garrett said to me 4 days before the accident happened. Him and I were just hanging out in the hot tub, and out of the blue, he says, "Dad, what's a legacy?" And I explained to him what a legacy was, and he pondered on that for a moment and then said, "When I go, I want to leave a legacy." And then 4 days later, he was gone. And it just tore me apart. Obviously losing your son is enough, but it was like almost a panic for me. How is this kid going to, and I know every parent will say this maybe about their kids, but Garrett was not your average kid. He inspired me. We never had a disagreement, never had an argument with him ever. We never had to discipline him. He was all about making mom and dad happy, and making other people happy, and making people laugh. And the slogan on his Instagram account was, "Get out there and change this world for the better." And so I struggled with this for a couple of years. And then a friend of mine who showed up in my life after I hadn't seen him for well over 30 years, who is also a bereaved parent. I remember going to his child's funeral back in 1985. I was only 20 and my friend was 25. And his little boy died suddenly and unexpectedly from a sudden medical issue. And side note, I actually said to my mom after the service, I said, there's no way I'm having kids. I never want to chance be, winding up as crushed as I just saw Dwayne this afternoon. And lo and behold, I experienced my worst nightmare. And anyway, by fluke, Dwayne, who I knew from, a small town outside of Saskatoon in Saskatchewan, shows up in Belleville. And we got in touch on Facebook, and longer story shortened, he invited my wife and I for a vacation to his villa down in Costa Rica. And it was down there while we were sitting there one night talking about some weighty things. And I was telling him about the legacy thing. And he said to me, maybe you're Garrett's legacy. Maybe you are Garrett's legacy. And that's really stuck with me. That was January of 2020, before the world got really crazy a few weeks later. So I started making this effort. Even before that, I was, to try and let me back up the clip a little bit. I went to therapy for about 1.5 years after the accident. The biggest takeaway from that 1.5 years of therapy was a little sign on the wall in the waiting room of my therapist's office that said, "Be the reason for someone else's smile today." And I knew I was already kind of slipping into a really kind of dark place. If I was in the drive-through and somebody said, how you doing today, or whatever, I mean, I wouldn't say it back, but I wanted to say, do you really want to know? Do you really want an answer to that?
Yeah.
I was getting, I was starting to build a lot of angst internally. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it where it was taking me. I felt changing the essence of who I was. And so I forced myself. It wasn't easy, but I forced myself to try and do that if I could, at least once each day. Not on the radio show, not as part of my radio show, but in my personal life. I wanted to try and make at least one person smile each day. Mm-hmm. And I can still remember the first time I did that. I was at the Stitch It at the mall, and to get something tailored. It was this god awful tacky suit that I ordered online. I was going to use it for stage performances, and I thought it looked pretty flashy. And when I got it, it was like 10 times more flashy than I expected. It had the paisley rhinestones and some sequins here, and I thought, oh my God, I'll never wear this, but I may as well get it tailored. So anyway, I walk in there, and there's just this one lady in there, and she's looking a little overwhelmed and overworked. Excuse me. And she says, she's kind of in a grumpy voice. She says, "Have you tried it on yet?" And I said, "No, not yet." She will try it on first. So I put the suit on, and I come out, and as she's pinning it up, she says, "When do you need this by?" So I just said, "Well, the funeral's Thursday." And she just cracked up. This smile comes across her face, and she just starts laughing. And she thanked me. She said, "Thank you." She said, "That is the funniest thing I've heard all week." And it was like medicine for my soul. And I started making that effort. It didn't have to be a home run joke, but just trying to make somebody smile each day, because it was more for me than anybody else. So then when I had that conversation about, legacy with my friend Dwayne, and this idea that maybe I'm Garrett's legacy, I just kind of started, really meditating on that whole concept and what that meant. And then there was one other event which led into the whole good guy thing. And that was a friend of mine asked me to MC a memorial service for his father, who had just passed away. I think it was December of last year. And a lot of people had so many great things to say, and well deserved of this guy. He was a good man. And I just thought, isn't it a shame that most of us will never hear the nicest words said about us until we're gone?
Yeah.
And so it was actually, I was thinking about that on New Year's morning of this year, and I just thought, I'm gonna eulogize somebody once a week. And there's enough negativity on the internet these days. Why not? And so I just started doing that every Sunday, and I haven't missed one yet so far. And it'll go for the year. And when I'm done at the end of the year, we're done.
I think for folks listening out there, you may not know the people that Buzz is talking about in these good guy alerts, but they are well worth reading because you get the whole flavor of the relationship you have with that particular individual. And it doesn't really matter if you don't know them or not, because it's just the way you write it. And it comes across really well.
Thank you.
Listen, Buzz, I thank you very much for sharing, for talking about your passion, whether it be broadcasting or standing up on stage, trying to get people to hide that word from you in their suit pocket. And I wish you all the best. And thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it.
One man trying to make at least one person smile each day. Hope you enjoy that profile of Buzz Collins. And you can listen to him weekdays from 6 to 10 a.m. on Rock 107 Radio in Belleville, Ontario. His personal website is at buzzcollins.com. This episode was recorded in late September 2021 using Zoom.
The theme music for the podcast is Stasis Oasis, written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of the episodes, please send a note to thekingstonianpodcast@gmail.com. For details on upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. The Kingstonian Podcast is hosted by Dave Cunningham and produced in Kingston, Ontario, Canada.